students. Okay, so this is just the study guide, or the unit organizer for our current unit. So I know we've already done some of this in class, but I wanted you to finish up, and I wanted to do a quick review of that. So this is going to be almost like we haven't filled it out before. So let's make sure we all have the same information. Okay, so up here, this is actually Savannah Kennedy's copy. I just borrowed hers, and the date that we originally did it was 3/5/18, and period 3 is what she's in. If you're in period 4, put P period 4. Okay, so our current unit of study, let me see if I can turn this a little bit so I can write. Our current unit of study is actually the judicial branch. So I want to put in there judicial branch. And the last unit that we studied was the executive branch. Okay, so the next unit that we're going to study is actually called the rule of law. So that's something exciting to look forward to. So we're just kind of putting the pieces together of what we currently studied, what the last one was, and where we're going. Now the overall big picture that we've been connecting to is that we are connecting to the 3 branches of government. The 3 branches of government help us explain how our specific government works and how our framers developed it based on the concepts that they really wanted to change from their prior government. So these 3 balances provide what's popular, you probably remember, as checks and balances, and basically that means that no one particular branch has too much power. And it's the executive branch, the judicial, and the legislative branch that all have different purposes, and those purposes all come together to help create a structure that really unites the United States and helps us function. So the judicial branch is essentially about the Supreme Court. So I'm going to put on the line Supreme Court. And I'll put the above it. So that's essentially what the whole branch is about, is the Supreme Court. Now when we go to study it, we're actually going to study the lower federal court, and you'll find out why and how that works with the Supreme Court. So I'm going to put a bubble around that because that's a unit of study, and I'm going to draw a line between them. Make sure that you put includes, because the Supreme Court, this is part of what's included in that. So I need you to understand the relationship, that the Supreme Court is the overall picture, and that includes the lower federal court. It also is going to, our second area we're going to talk about is the jurisdiction. Oops. I misspelled that. I apologize. Jurisdiction. Sorry. Okay, so put a bubble around that because that's our second area, because not every court that you see is a federal court, and what they talk about in those courts is not always the same. So Supreme Court includes jurisdiction, because the Supreme Court does not hear every single case. So it's important you understand what exactly is involved in the Supreme Court. And the last thing that we talk about that's really important is judges. There are a panel of judges in the Supreme Court, and there are judges when it comes to the lower federal court. So it's important you understand that. And the Supreme Court also includes judges. So as we study the judicial branch, we're going to talk a lot about the Supreme Court. And within the Supreme Court, we're going to discover the lower federal court, each jurisdiction, and the judges that are contained or what they do within those Supreme Courts system. So that is the really important part. So we've done 1, 2, 3, 4. We kind of figure out all how this folds together. And then let's go down to the bottom and let's talk about the unit relationship. So the unit relationship just tells me what kind of, how it's related. A lot of times when we read a textbook, cause and effect, there's an explanation, or there's a lot of stuff that you can find in a book, and understanding how it works together is usually very helpful. So a lot of what we're going to find is that we need explanation when it comes to the judicial branch. We're also going to understand more about how it's organized. It is not just simply one courthouse with a panel of judges. There's more involved now. We've evolved as our country has developed. So explanation, organized, and then we actually have what is called a hierarchy. You cannot just go straight to the Supreme Court. I understand that the movies make you think you can, but you can't. You have to, there's a hierarchy within the courts, and it's really important to understand that. Okay, so now we're talking about the unit self-test questions. So as we learn about all of this information and we dissect the Supreme Court and what it means in those particular areas, we're going to be asking ourselves 3 questions. The first question is, why is the judiciary separate from the other branches of government? So that is a question that, after probably studying a little bit about the Supreme Court and the lower federal court system, you'll start to understand why we separated the judiciary into its own branch. Because what judiciary means and what it deals with is upholding and translating the law. So those written words that the legislative branch writes and creates, the judges, their job is to determine if an event is against the law or not against the law, and how the interpretation of the law applies to that particular situation. So we'll get more into that. So we'll discover more about that information of the why. How does the judiciary keep a balance of power within the courts? Okay, so my next question is, how does the judiciary keep a balance of power within the courts? Again, when we talk about the federal court system and the jurisdiction, I think you'll find a lot of your answers in this, how to answer this question. And the third question you're going to need to know is, how does a court decision set a precedent for the country? Oh, losing my paper. Country. Now, precedent is almost like a, let me see if I can think. It's almost like if the precedent was, it's almost like an expectation. And a lot of times when you have a court decision, if you say the law means this one way, then a lot of the things that come after it are going to follow the same suit because the translation was there. So the word precedent is kind of a big word, but it means a lot. And what I need you to remember is that if you can answer these 3 questions with evidence and information from the chapter, then you should be able to get an A on the test, no problem. So these 3 questions are key to your success. You need to know those. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk about is our schedule. And we do have a schedule that we're going to do. I'm going to separate it into not actually dates, but days. So that way you can, if you're absent, you don't get confused on where we are. And you can check it off. Use these boxes to check it off as you complete something. So day 1, we actually kind of did. And it is the intro or the unit organizer. And we're also talking about the SWS, which this just simply means it's the shipwrecked sailors case. So SWS is the shipwrecked sailors case. That is this little sheet of paper right here. And you're going to read about the 3 sailors and what happened to them. And then we're going to just simply discuss the questions that go with it. So once we complete the organizer, we're going to actually go over the shipwrecked sailors and understand what it's like to be a judge. The second day, I'm going to skip a line so I have a little more room. The second day is we're going to do the judicial PowerPoint. Now I'm doing this in shorthand because I don't have enough room. So I took out all the vowels. That's a really good shorthand trick to do. PWRPNT. I'm actually going to zoom in on this so you can see a little better. But the day 2 is about the judicial PowerPoint. And we're also going to talk about our frame organizer. So our frame organizer is going to take each individual section and highlight the key points. That'll be an easy study guide for you, so that way you are sure that you get the information you need. The last part is we're going to do day 3. And this is where we're going to talk about the Supreme Court PowerPoint. Again, I did the short version of PowerPoint. And we're going to include 2 videos that I want you to see. They actually explain things really well. And then we're also going to do the who hears the case. So I know I wrote that kind of tiny to pinpoint it in there, but you should be able to check it off at a later date. But day 3, we just have some more guided notes that we're going to do. We're going to watch a couple videos, then we're going to talk about who hears the case. Day 4 is just a judicial review. It's actually a concept that it will help really explain number 1 and number 3. It's very interesting video with lots of really good information. But day 4 is about the judicial review. Video. And I'm also going to introduce the concept to your PBL. And day 5, the final day of our learning specifically, we're going to do the landmark cases PowerPoint. I'm going to shorten that, take out all the vowels. PowerPoint, and you're going to begin your PBL. Now PBL, I'm just going to write on the side right here, PBL is equal to project-based learning. Now don't worry about the project, because the main thing is that you're going to have grades for completing your organizers. You're also going to have grades for your participation. You're going to have grades for all of those things that you did last week for me, all those sheets. And your final is actually going to be to completely redo one of them and make it better based on all the learning that you did. And your project-based learning is you're going to do a little tiny bit of research, you're going to fill some things out, and you're going to explain to me the landmark cases, and I will teach you everything you need to know to do those. So this is your unit organizer. This is the key to your success on this chapter. You need to make sure that you have this in your folder at all times because we're going to refer to it several times. So if there's anything that you missed, you may backtrack the video, pause it, replay it, write it down, whatever you need to do. So make sure that you have this information with you at all times. If you have any questions, please let somebody know and we'll be happy to help.